Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to start our board meeting. Can we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amanda, will you call the roll?
Trustee Messick?
Here.
Trustee Rocco?
Here.
Trustee Sheehan is absent. Trustee Casera is absent. Trustee Lautner?
Here.
Trustee Zora is absent. President DeCipio?
Here.
Quorum is present, sir.
Thank you, Amanda. Trustee Zora's mom is ill, and so she's spending the night with her. Trustee Casera's mom is very, very ill, and so he's at home with her. And Trustee Sheehan's, they're putting their dog down tonight, so it's kind of a gloomy night out there. But tonight's a good night because I get to vote.
Yes, you do.
So that's why everybody's here.
Yes.
Okay, so consent agenda, Amanda?
The items on the consent agenda are as follows. Village Board meeting, September 26, 2017. Work session meeting, October 10th, 2017. B, action Cook County Health Inspections. Motion to approve the resolution to allow the village president to execute a certain agreement with the Cook County Department of Public Health for health inspection services effective December 1st, 2017 and continuing through November 30th, 2018. C, action sale of surplus vehicles and equipment. Motion approving an ordinance authorizing the sale of surplus property owned by the Village of LaGrange Park. D, action 2018 Sherwood Road resurfacing project. Edward Hancock Engineering Agreements. Motion authorizing the village manager to execute an agreement between the Village of LaGrange Park and Hancock Engineering for professional design engineering services for the Sherwood Road resurfacing project in the amount not to exceed $26,500 to be spent during the FY 17-18 budget. E, action motion to authorize the president and chairperson of the finance committee to sign the register for bills and authorize the treasurer and village clerk to sign checks in the payment of operating bills and salaries is itemized in the check registers. And lastly, motion to authorize the village treasurer and village clerk to sign checks in the payment of payroll and other bills that become due between this date and November 28th, 2017, with subsequent approval of the payroll register and voucher register by the Board of Trustees at its regular meeting to be held on November 28th, 2017.
Thank you, Amanda. I'll entertain a motion to approve consent agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
Motion is second. Amanda, call the roll.
Trustee Messick?
Yes.
Trustee Rocco?
Yes.
Trustee Lautner?
Yes.
President DeCipio?
Yes,
Motion passes unanimously.
that felt good. Okay, village manager report in the absence of Julia. Emily, would you please give a report?
Sure. I just have two things to report this evening. The first is a reminder, and I think this is also in the administration report, that the LaGrange Park Chamber of Commerce Halloween event is coming up this Friday. The Haunted Trolley event will be Friday starting at 4 p.m. You may well have noticed that there's a lot of work going along 31st Street. NICOR is doing quite a bit of work. The village has been on top of that. Public Works has been in constant contact with NICOR, and they will be doing a sweep tomorrow just to make sure that the area will be safe for trick-or-treaters. So we are keeping an eye on that because we do expect that there will be some large crowds that event will bring in. So looking forward to supporting the chamber in that event. And then the other item I have is just a reminder that the village will be hosting our annual State of the Village address on Thursday, November 2nd here at Village Hall. That will be at 7 p.m. And for those who are unable to make that, there will be a second address held at Plymouth Place on Friday, November 3rd at 1 p.m. And the address will also be broadcast on the village's website. So that's all I have this evening.
Thank you, Emily. Administration Committee, Trustee Lautner.
Thank you, Mr. President. This will be a little redundant, but I do have a couple items to report on this evening from the administration area. And first of all, regarding the Halloween event upcoming, the village would like to remind our residents that Halloween in LaGrange Park is celebrated on Tuesday, October 31st with trick-or-treat hours from 3 p.m. until 8 p.m. The village does encourage residents to exercise extra caution on Halloween evening while having fun, of course. Young children should be accompanied by an adult or an older responsible child. All children should walk from house to house and use the sidewalk when it is available. Children should be cautioned against running out between parked cars or across lawns, pardon me, where ornaments or furniture present dangers. Drivers are reminded to use extra caution on that evening when traveling through our neighborhoods. And just to recap on the haunted trolley trick or treat, on Friday, October 27th, the LaGrange Park Chamber of Commerce will be sponsoring its annual Haunted Trolley Trick or Treat event. This free event will be held from 4 p.m. until 6:30 p.m. Parents and children are invited to hop on a trolley at one of several locations, including the LaGrange Park Community Park District facility, the Village Market, and locations along 31st Street. The trolleys will travel along a designated route, dropping patrons at specific stops so that the children can trick or treat amongst the various businesses along the route. State of the Village, as mentioned, will host our 9th annual State of the Village address at Village Hall on Thursday, November 2nd, as mentioned, at 7 p.m. I encourage all residents to attend that. All residents are invited to attend this free event. President DeCipio and village staff will provide an overview of the village's budget, the infrastructure projects that are underway, and progress on special efforts such as the commercial revitalization project. The Community Park District and LaGrange Park District and the Library District will also provide information on their current initiatives. For those who are unable to attend, a second State of the Village address will be held on Friday, November 3rd at 1 p.m. at Plymouth Place. So we do encourage all residents to attend one of these sessions. I think you'll find it quite informative. And that concludes my report from the administration area this evening, Mr. President.
Thank you, Trustee Laudner. And in the absence of Trustee Zora, would you give the building and zoning report?
And I will be happy to. And from that area, following is a brief summary of the building department activities for the month of September. There were 98 building permits that were issued in September compared to 94 issued last September. Permits issued year to date still remain somewhat less as compared to this point last year. We are now at 724 permits being issued so far this calendar year compared to 762 at this time last year. Estimated construction costs for the month were nearly double compared to September of 2016. Permit fees collected this September were also substantially higher compared to September of 2016, nearly 75%. Permit fees collected were nearly $44,000 this past month compared to just over $25,000 last September. There were 137 inspections conducted this September compared to 136 last September, and of those, 7 were not approved. Work began during the month on the reconstruction of St. Louis de Marlac parking lots. Prior to the work beginning, our village staff met with representatives of St. Louis, the contractor's engineering firm, and MWRD to review and discuss specific details regarding the work. Also discussed were safety issues, traffic patterns, parking, and overall timelines for various portions of the work. And also during the month, our staff had various discussions with the owner and applicant and their representatives of the proposed restaurant to be located at 1017 East 31st Street. Various plans and specifications were reviewed during the month in preparation of issuing the permits for renovations. And that concludes my report from the building and from the building area.
Thank you, Trustee Laudner. Engineering capital project, in the absence of Trustee Kucera, that's Trustee Messick.
Thank you, Mr. President. Engineering and capital projects report for September 2017. Visu Sewer of Illinois completed all the immersion lining of all segments of the village combined sewer system that were identified in the 2017 sewer lining project. This type of maintenance operations is undertaken in order to rehabilitate portions of the sewer without the excavating and replacing the pipe. This minimizes the expense to the village and disruption to the residents. Davis Concrete, the contractor for the 2017 street paving program west section, has completed all work on the project. Only punch list items and closeout work remains to be performed. This work is expected to be done by the end of December. K5 has also completed their work for the 2017 street repaving program north section. Punch list items and closeout work on this job should be completed by the end of December as well. And lastly, Chicagoland Paving has completed work on the 2017 patching project contract to perform pavement patching throughout the village. This patching program is a maintenance activity used by the village to extend the service life of the existing pavements until a complete resurfacing is required. And that concludes engineering and capital project, and there is no action items.
Thank you, Trustee Messick. I apologize to you and Trustee Lautner. You each give your separate reports. You should have given the other one, but you guys did great, even though you're not on a committee. I apologize. Okay, Public Safety Committee, Trustee Messick, you are chair of that committee, so you can give the report.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'll start with the Police Department summary of activities for September 2017. The total number of crimes reported is slightly higher than last year. To date, all reported crimes against persons and property at 232 incidents compared to 218 in total through September of last year. Police Department total service calls remain similar to last year, with 5,045 reported through September of this year compared to 4,878 reported in the same time frame last year. The annual fit test for all sworn patrol officers, including supervisors and police administration, will take place between the dates of October 27th and November 18th or November 8th of 2017. Tests will be conducted in the weight room located in the basement of Village Hall. They will consist of a 20% reduction for all staff in relation to the Illinois state mandated power test, which is a 1.5-mile run, walk, sit-ups in a minute, bench press, and sit and reach. This test will result in the officer's duty assignment for the day. The department, in association with the DEA, or Drug Enforcement Administration, and the Coalition for a Drug-Free Lyons Township, will host a national prescription drug take-back event on Saturday, October 28th, this coming Saturday, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. in the lobby area at the Village Hall. The second session of the Police Citizen Academy was offered between the months of September through mid-October 2017. All participants were very satisfied with the education they gained throughout the program. The next session will be planned for the spring of 2018 to be announced, and please make sure to take part in this great community-based event. And I will say myself and Trustee Lautner can speak for himself, attended this last one, and it's a great community outreach and good education for all residents, so I would suggest to take advantage of it. You learn a lot more about what goes on. And lastly, reminder to always lock your vehicles, houses, and garages when not around. Also keep valuables secured and out of sight at all times. These thieves take advantage of crime of opportunity. And that concludes the Police Department report. On to Fire Department activities for September 2017. EMS incidents this month were 144. There have been 1,277 year-to-date compared to 1,262 year-to-date in 2016. Fire rescue incidents this month were 33. There had been 361 year-to-date compared to 350 last year. Personnel completed the installation of equipment and supplies on our new ambulance. Following the undergoing training on the ambulance and passing of inspections by Loyola EMS and IDPH, the ambulance was placed in service on October 6th. Annual service testing was conducted by Underwriters Laboratories on the pumps on each of our fire apparatus. During the month, staff conducted interviews of contract paramedic firefighters to fill a shift opening. Applicant Matthew Scott was chosen to fill the position and began employment on the PSSI contract during the month. He will also serve the department on his time off in a paid-on-call capacity. Over the weekend of September 15th, the fire chief attended the Illinois Fire Chiefs Association Volunteer and Combination Officer Conference, where many sessions and discussions focused on issues facing fire departments, staffed predominantly by volunteer, paid-on-call, and part-time employees. The fire chief participated by web in the ComEd JOC drill, which was held in Broadview. A JOC is opened up in a region where a significantly widespread outage takes place, and part of the process is to help identify critical buildings and infrastructure where power restoration needs to be a priority. And on September 21st, most chief officers participated in an emergency management exercise at Plymouth Place, which was coordinated by their collaborative healthcare urgency group. It was an area-wide event that tested the ability to relocate patients and residents from 2 facilities that had to be evacuated. And that concludes the fire report and public safety, and there is no action items.
Thank you, Trustee Messick. Public Works Committee, in the absence of trustee Sheehan, trustee Messick, would you give that report?
Certainly will. Thank you, Mr.
You
President.
are on that committee.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, starting with the Public Works Department report for September 2017. The sweepers spent 80 hours cleaning 201 miles of village streets and picked up 81 yards of debris. Brush pickup took place the first full week of September, 111 day shift hours, making several passes through town, removing approximately 130 yards of brush from the parkways. Tree maintenance, trimming, and inspections was performed during 15 regular hours. 20 day shift hours were spent repairing parkways from various jobs with dirt and grass seed. 40.5 regular hours were spent on the maintenance of public work equipment and vehicles, and 79 hours were spent filling potholes and patching water excavations with approximately 23 tons of asphalt. Hydrant flushing was completed on the west side of town, completing this year's program. The time capsule for the village's 125th anniversary was buried, and the monument plaque will be installed next month. 173 day shift hours were spent on building and ground maintenance around the Public Works facility, Village Hall, and along 31st Street. Barricades were put out for 42 block parties, and work orders were completed with crews removing roadkill, making sign repairs, and attending to resident concerns. There was a lot of various vehicle maintenance, and then on to the Water Department operations. Over 475 day shift hours and 70 overtime man hours during the month of September were spent on maintenance and repairs of sewer and water mains. 35,430 gallons of water were purchased from the Brookfield North Riverside Water Commission. 1,346 water meters were read in Section 3. 54 monthly accounts and 25 final meter readings were taken. Various inspections, appointments, and service calls performed. 5 water and sewer inspections, 6 meter appointments, and 28 service calls were performed. 15 water bacterial samples were taken and all passed. 201 utility locations were identified prior to excavations. 3 water mains were repaired, and 1 service line was as well. And there was 4 Buffalo box repairs, and that completes the Public Safety Monthly Report, and there is 1 action item. So let me get to... All right, the purpose is to gain Village Board approval of a change order on the new meter installation at Plymouth Place. The general background is when changing out the water meters at Plymouth Place, our contractor encountered field conditions that were not known at the time bids were sought. The room within the meter vault did not allow enough room for the new meter to be installed with the shutoff valve in place. The new meters are larger than the old meters. We originally tried to substitute a butterfly valve, which is smaller than a standard valve, but that proved problematic with the meter accurately reading the water flow. A crew was brought back to remove the valve and install a straight pipe. There is a valve downstream from that meter that can be used for emergency reasons. So I would like to make a motion to approve a change order in the amount of $2,870.97.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion, trustee Messick?
It's pretty straightforward, Mr. President. It was unforeseen, and so I would approve this.
Any other comments from the board? Seeing none, Amanda, call the roll.
Trustee Messick?
Yes.
Trustee Rocco?
Yes.
Trustee Lautner?
Yes.
President DeCipio?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
That concludes Public Works, Mr. President.
Thank you, trustee Messick. Moving on, Finance Committee, trustee Rocco?
Thank you, Mr. President. We are 42% of the through our fiscal year for 2018. And to date, our general fund revenue is at 45% of the annual budget and $48,000 lower than last year. Sales tax is up about 1% this year, while property tax receipts are slightly lower last year due to prior year refunds. Telecommunication taxes are down by 9%. Permit revenue is generally higher across all categories. I just want to make one quick comment here. When you're buying your Halloween candy, you might want to consider shopping local for sales tax. Intergovernmental revenue is down about 4%, primarily due to lower income tax receipts. Although the state income tax was increased in July, the local government share was proportionally reduced so that the entire increase in collections goes to the state. Furthermore, the state budget agreement reduced the local government share by an additional 10% for the state's 2018 fiscal year. Charges for services are up slightly due to increased ambulance fee receipts. Fine revenue is about 30% lower than last year. Revenue from court fines has continued a downward trend, while ticketed collections are also lower than last year. Miscellaneous revenue is up about 13% due to increased interest earnings, low tower lease revenue, and contributions for the village's anniversary. Total general fund expenditures are within expectations at 39% of the annual budget and about $284,000 above last year. The increase is primarily due to the new LTAC annual contribution, which is paid on a quarterly basis beginning in May from the police and fire budget. That concludes my report, and there is an action item, Mr. President. To approve the estimate of the 2017 village property tax levy as required by the Truth in Taxation Law. The Truth in Taxation Law requires that the village board estimate the amount of property taxes to be levied at least 20 days prior to the adoption of the annual tax levy. The village's 2017 tax levy ordinance will be reviewed at the November 14th work session and then placed on the agenda for board approval at the November 28th meeting. The village's annual property tax levy is restricted by the State of Illinois' Property Tax Extension Limitation Law, PTEL. The PTEL limits the amount the village may increase the aggregate levy each year to the lesser of 5% or the change in the consumer price index. The term aggregate levy is specifically defined by the Truth in Taxation Law to include the corporate and special purpose levies and excludes levies for debt service. For the 2017 levy, the PTEL CPI change is 2.1% and is therefore the limiting factor. PTEL allows the village to collect additional taxes on new property value. Over the past 10 years, the value of new property has ranged between 0.04% and 0.64% of the village's total equalized assessed value. We will not know the actual amount of the new value until well after the village's tax levy ordinance is due to the county. As such, an estimated increase of 2% of the equal assessed value has been incorporated into the levy estimate calculation to ensure all potential new value is included. The county will reduce the village's actual extension to the amount allowed under PTEL. The estimate aggregate levy for 2017 is $3,622,048, which is 4.1% above the 2016 extension of $3,478,666. The estimate aggregate levy is less than a 5% increase, therefore a public hearing is not required by the Truth in Taxation Law. The village's 2017 property tax will also include a debt service amount for the 2016 road and fire bonds approved by the referendum. For the 2017 levy, the debt service amount is $1,248,000. The actual bond levy will include a 5% loss factor to ensure adequate funds are available to pay the debt service. The village board reviewed the 2017 levy estimate at the October 10th work session, and staff recommends the village board approve the top property tax estimate at tonight's meeting. So I move that the president and village board of trustees estimate that the amount necessary to be raised from the 2017 property tax levy is $3,622,048. $622,048 exclusive of the debt service, which amount is less than 5% greater than the amount of the taxes extended for 2016.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Discussion, trustee Rocco?
Thank you, Mr. President. We do this every year. This is just, we want to make sure that we're recouping the full amount of all new improved property, but yet still following the Truth in Taxation Law of the increase in taxes below the 5%. And so, of course, I say yes.
Thank you, trustee Rocco. Any other comments from the board? Amanda, call the roll.
Trustee Messick?
Yes.
Trustee Rocco?
Yes.
Trustee Lautner?
Yes.
President DeCipio?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, trustee Rocco.
Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. President, and that concludes my report and the action items for the Finance Committee.
Commercial Revitalization Committee, in the absence of trustee Casera, trustee Rocco, would you give that report?
Thank you, Mr. President. The report is village staff has reached a tentative agreement with Jason Koronek for Purpose Restaurant at 1015 and 1017 East 31st Street. The proposed redevelopment agreement is on the agenda for consideration this evening, which that moves us right into the next item that's up for action. At the April 25th, 2017 board meeting, the village board confirmed its support to incentivize a new restaurant at 1015 and 1017 East 31st Street using TIF and/or BDD dollars. The board approved a business district. The board approved an inducement resolution acknowledging the village's conceptual approval of the proposed project where any financial assistance would be contingent upon the village approving and executing a redevelopment agreement. Since that time, village staff and the village's special TIF BDD council have been in negotiations with Jason Kornick, the restaurateur and owner of the property, regarding a proposed redevelopment agreement. The proposed redevelopment agreement is attached to our packet. Staff recommends adopting the ordinance approving the redevelopment agreement for the redevelopment of 1015, 1017 South 31st Street. This item is up for discussion and action. I move to adopt an ordinance of the Village of LaGrange Park, Cook County, Illinois, approving a redevelopment agreement for the redevelopment of 1015 and 1017 31st Street.
Second.
Motion and a second, discussion. Trustee Rocco?
Yes, I guess my first question is, how did we come up with $135,000?
That number was based on a number of factors. We reviewed the pro forma that the applicant submitted. Mr. Kornick submitted a pro forma that detailed his anticipated expenses, both related to site acquisition as well as improvements to the property, as well as the items that would need to be purchased to run the restaurant, the tables and chairs and things like that. So we reviewed everything that he submitted in terms of the costs incurred. Then we looked at the total improvements that were needed for the area, as well as the projected sales tax revenue and the projected TIF increment. And then we came up with an amount that we felt was appropriate in terms of the total costs of the project compared to the anticipated revenues, and then negotiated with him. He initially asked for more than the $135,000, but we ultimately settled on the $135,000 because we thought that was a fair amount, given the investment that he would be making.
Thank you. So what is, in his business plan, then, what is, so if I got it right, it's 13, well, I know some of it's gonna come from the TIF, and some of it's gonna come from the BDD. So I was using the BDD, like, just trying to figure, okay, there's $13,500,000 before he would be able to collect the $135,000, because it's 1%, am I right? Okay. So I'm just curious, what is, in his business plan, when does he anticipate, how much does he anticipate making in sales? You were saying about the revenue. What is his what's his anticipated revenue?
I believe the estimates, and Mr. Kornick is here, so he can certainly, jump in at any point if I'm misconstruing any of the data. I believe the initial estimates were between $12,000 and $13,000 that would be generated in BDD revenue. So that's just the 1%. That's not total sales. I'm trying to remember what the initial number was. Do you remember, Jason? I think it was 130. I want to say maybe 130,000. So we anticipate that it will take probably 8 to 10 years in order to reimburse him the full 135,000 using both TIF and business development district dollars, because he will only receive the reimbursement monies based on what he generates. So he will not receive business district dollars from other businesses that are generating revenue. For example, Ace Hardware is in the same business development district and is also contributing to the business development district fund. But he would not be able to obtain revenue that they're generating. He would only be able to obtain the revenue that we receive as a result of his business.
From what I understand, and correct me and make sure that we're clear on this, that's that was be a follow-up question, but I think you're answering it already. But I still want to go back to make sure I'm clear on that. But yes, the money that's coming from the TIF and the money that's coming from the BDD is only coming from 1015, 1017.
Correct.
So the increment, the change of the taxes, any increase in the taxes for the TIF, that's going to come only for the 1015, 1017, and the BDD's that percent. And then, from what I understand, he's getting 100% of the BDD for the first 3 years, is it? And then after that, 90% or something like that, right?
75.
Or 75%, and then it's 90% of the increment immediately, and I think it's always stays 90%.
Stays 90. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I guess I'm trying to figure out what is his, I still don't know if I'm clear. So you're anticipating that it's gonna take 10 to 12 10 to 15 years before he can pay us.
8 to 10 years.
8 to 10 years before pay. So in his business plan, well, how much does he plan on making a year? How much sales revenue does he plan on making?
You want to respond to that, Jason? I think I think it was 130,000 in sales tax generated.
That's what you're saying, that's what he anticipates of making 130,000
In sales tax.
in sales tax.
Total sales tax.
Sales tax. So times 7. Right, is it 7, what's the percentage of the sales tax, 6%? I'm trying to think, 5% plus 1 do we add? I'm just trying to figure out what the,
Sales tax rate's 10%.
10%, so then is it, he's planning on making, okay. And is that reasonable? I'm just, are we, you know, I mean, is this a reasonable, are we, like, is that a reasonable?
Well, we're obviously not in the restaurant business. We did some preliminary, research, and it seems reasonable. But really, it's in the applicant's best interest to be, providing accurate estimates, because if that estimate is too high, then he is reimbursed at a much lower rate. So if he only generates 800,000 in sales, then he's going to generate a much lower increment for the business development district, and therefore he would be reimbursed less, and it would take longer for him to be reimbursed the total 135,000. We're not reimbursing him any money that we wouldn't otherwise receive if he were not there.
And is there a 10-year, I know there's a $135,000 limit. Is there a 10-year limit on there? Did I see something about 10 years in there, or is it?
The agreement is 15 years. We do anticipate that based on his sales projections and the projections that were done as part of the feasibility study, that it would be repaid off within 8 to 10 years. But the agreement is 15 years just in case, because you never know what could happen. And we wanted to make sure that he received the full 135,000. And if it does, for some reason, take 12 or 13 years, we wanted to make sure that there was the opportunity for him to receive the full amount.
And after 15 years, if he has not received 135,000, that's end of story. And but the numbers show that it's 10 years. We're just giving him 5 more years.
I mean, 8 to 10 years. It really depends on how the property is reassessed by the county, how much property values go up. There are assumptions that are built into all of these calculations, but based on some conservative assumptions, we think 8 to 10 years.
Okay, and they're applying. I see that from what I understand, they've already applied to see if they get the taxes reduced, because I know the taxes around here went crazy. So I'm assuming that they may have already gotten something that says that they've gotten some reduction on it, or did they?
They told us that they have applied. They have appealed the property taxes. That's all that we know. I don't know if they have if they've received any confirmation of a decision being made on that.
All right, and then there was one. I was confused when they were when I was talking about the difference in the increment, that if the value gets decreased, the increment, the amount of taxes is going to be decreased accordingly. The 135,000 is going to be reduced. If the taxes are reduced, that $135,000 is going to be reduced. I'm not quite sure if I get that paragraph, if that paragraph is really clear, like how is that worked out in terms of actual dollars? I don't, I mean, and my concern is this, because it's not like I'm the sharpest tool in the shed, but I'm not sure what that is, and I just want to make sure that it's clear with both parties what's meant by that reduction, that increment. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know exactly what you're talking about,
Okay.
and I can explain it, but I know who can explain it better, and that is Larry.
All right.
So I'm going to let Larry explain it.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Emily.
You know what she's asking, right?
Yes. That clause is in there because if there's a appeal that's successful, there is usually a refund involved. And that refund is generated because it takes generally several years for an appeal to go through. It means that the refund of taxes from that prior year is coming out of current year revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if they've already received TIF money that we collected, say, in 2016, they get a refund of money in 2018 for TIF or for their property tax in 2016, they would essentially get the money twice. County will give them a check. We'll have to reimburse the county, but they've already received the money that we gave them back in 2016. Therefore, we take it off their total of 135,000 in order to not pay them twice for those that year.
Okay, so wait, does this mean that they're still gonna be 135,000, it's just that they're not gonna be charged twice? So the end result, it's not gonna be reduced, they're still getting 135. They are just gonna give back okay, maybe that's why that paragraph was confusing to me, but they're just gonna get back, whatever discount they got, but it's still, am I right on that one?
Yeah, there's two ways you can reduce your assessed valuation. One is you can reduce it on a going forward basis. That is to say that the 2017 assessed valuation came out this year, and if you appeal the assessed valuation before you pay the taxes, then the result of that is reflected on your future tax bill. So that type of reduction does not play into this at all. This is intended to be more like the certificate of error process, where you're appealing a reduction of taxes you already paid through a C of E, certificate of error. So what we're saying is you only get the $135,000 one time. Therefore, if they get a reduction of taxes that results in us having paid an increment out, and the county gets that money back from us, that gets deducted from the $135,000, so they don't get it twice.
Okay, and is that understood by the owner and operator?
We're not happy with the decision, but yes.
Okay, so I just want to make sure we're clear on we're all got the same understanding, a meeting of the minds on that.
This is what held up. There's a lot of things that are in there that's holding up the process of this. And some people call it double dipping, and it's not, because we know how Cook County assesses property and what they do. So what's gonna happen now is, I'll get reassessed on the project, what we put into it. And so now, in 3 years, my assessed value is gonna skyrocket to outrageous, and it kind of defeats the purpose, because the assessed value of the building isn't that high. They're gonna go off of what we pulled for permits. So you're calling it double dip. We wanted it in there as one time we can appeal the taxes, value of all the improvements, and then after that, we wouldn't do it for the agreements. Attorneys went back and forth for weeks on this. Costing me more money in attorney fees of fighting this. So is it cleared up? We have an understanding, correct?
They have agreed to the language. I think it's not their ideal language, as Mr. Cornick has indicated, but they have agreed to it.
But that's the understanding, that if there's a certificate of error and it comes back, that the money comes, we reduce that amount. Okay, at the end of the day, it's a total of 135,000. Because let me see if there's other unclarity. Just want to make sure it's,
Mr. President,
Trustee Lautner?
I did have a couple questions.
Oh,
And I know Scott's got some too, so she's
Okay,
not,
okay.
I'm
Trustee
sorry.
Rocco's
I
not
was
done
looking
yet.
at
No,
my-
no.
We're waiting on her thought process
No
going
problem.
through.
I've got to get my notes just to
No
make sure. I
problem.
just want to make sure I wanted to get this. All right, and then I think we understood that, just that the money that's going into that staff, the separate account, everything is completely just for 1015, 1017, not other properties that are in the TIF.
Only what he generates.
Only what he generates, okay. All right, my concern, I think, would be this, is that, the one concern I have is when you're saying it's 8 to 10 years and we're giving him 15 years for that agreement. I'm not sure if that, because I'm not, I don't know if I'm comfortable with the business plan, like we're anticipating this. And if we're anticipating that it's gonna be 8 to 10 years, I'm not sure why we're giving him 15. I understand giving some leeway, but that seems like almost double. If it's 8 years and we're giving 15, I don't know if seems pretty, that's where I think, maybe concerned.
The only comment I would make to that is that the agreement says if he fails to operate his restaurant for the period of time covered by the agreement, then he's in default and we don't give him any more money. So if you're concerned that he's going to somehow go out of business, that's covered in the agreement already. So the point of stretching it out to 15 years, I believe, is to allow him to get the whole $135,000 if he remains in business continuously for that period of time, because the village is making a commitment to him for the $135,000 of sales tax revenue generated by his business.
I understand what you're saying, and I do. I understand what you're saying. You know, I mean, it's in the 5 days. Is for in terms of 5 days opening? Is it why do we do it 5 and not 6? I was just curious. That normal 5 business days open minimum.
We just wanted to provide some assurance to the village that he would operate as a regular full-service restaurant during the duration of the agreement. Our understanding is that he intends to be open more than 5 days a week, but we wanted to make sure that the regulations weren't too stringent. I mean, we don't want to tell him how to run his business and what the appropriate, hours of operation are and that sort of thing. So we wanted to have some assurance in there by requiring some standards, but we didn't want to be overly strict with what we were requiring.
All right, because it just seems like I know a lot of businesses have 1 day they'll close, but 2 days is unusual for a restaurant for food service. You generally see where they'll be closed 1 day, Mondays, common.
I believe that is his
2
plan.
days is unusual. Pardon me?
I believe that is his plan, is to be open 6 days a week. 7.
We're just setting up a minimum, though.
Yeah, and the reason and the logic behind not making it 6 as opposed to 5, I'm just curious. I mean,
Again, just trying not to be overly restrictive. I mean, we don't want to get into the operations of his restaurant. We want to provide some minimum assurance to the village that it operates as a regular full-service restaurant, but we don't want to be overreaching.
okay. Those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Trustee Rocco. Trustee Messick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just had 2 quick questions, and it would be more for Emily or maybe even Larry. But how was the agreed amount of percentages or amounts decided? Was it just
In terms of the percent of BDD
Yeah.
dollars and TIF dollars,
Right, and the
primarily.
percentages, of those, like it's 90 or whatever.
A lot of that was driven by our TIF council. With regard to the TIF, the 90%, it was her recommendation based on her experience in putting these agreements together that the village not provide any more than 90% because we do need to retain a small portion of those TIF dollars to cover our administrative costs. There are annual administrative costs. We will be required to do an annual audit, a comptroller report that gets turned into the state and so on. So we wanted to make sure we were retaining some of that money to cover those costs. As for the BDD dollars, 100% was a bit of a compromise, to be honest. I think the village was initially looking at 75%. It was important to the applicant that they receive a greater percentage of the incentive earlier on in the process, and so they requested the full 100%. We felt that was appropriate for the first 3 years. But after that, we wanted to step it back to 75% so that we could start to continue so that business could continue to contribute to the Business Development District Fund. We didn't think it was appropriate for them to be pulling all the money out of that fund that they generate. They should also have to contribute some money back, and that would be the 25% they would be contributing back each year.
Excellent, thank you. And just one other question. Can we view this as a template, this kind of negotiation? Because this is our first real deal under the BDD. Or is each project going to require, like, the village to recreate, I know there's different circumstances for everything, but like I said, a template can be an overly broad.
Certainly every project will be different, and so we will have to negotiate an individual agreement for each project. Generally speaking, and this is coming from our TIF council who has lots of experience with this, the first agreement tends to be a bit more generous than future agreements just because this is the person who is seen as taking the largest risk. It's the Catalyst project, or so we hope it's the Catalyst project. So this one might be a bit more generous than future agreements would be. But I think overall it is a good template in terms of the percentages of TIF dollars and BDD dollars that are being offered. And I think our TIF council, Kathy Orr, would say it would certainly be appropriate for us to use this as a baseline for going forward.
Excellent, thank you very much. I'm just hoping that this is so successful we get it, we get him back his money in 5 years.
Thank you, trustee Massick. Trustee Lautner?
Thank you, Mr. President. A couple clarification questions that I have is, what is the frequency of the TIF BDD calculation and then the distribution of this fund? Is that on an annual basis, or what, how is that scheduled out?
Well, I believe the TIF will be on an annual basis, so that would be a disbursement that would come annually. The Business Development District dollars, we anticipate we will receive every 4 months. We haven't received any yet, so, and sometimes the state is late with their payments. So the intent, we think we'll get them 3 times a year, and the intent would be then to disperse them to the owner 3 times a year, but we will only disperse them once we receive them. So if we don't receive them 3 times a year for some
Okay.
reason and we get them twice, you would just get 2 payments.
So there's not a scheduled point at which we need to come up with the funds to satisfy prior to the state's reimbursement?
Right, we're
Okay.
only committing to reimburse funds that we receive. So if the funds are collected by the state and for whatever reason they're not dispersed to us, we're not obligated to disperse them to the owner. We're only obligated to disperse what we receive from the state once we receive it.
Okay, good. And in terms of clarification on how the clawback works, is, if I understood it correctly, need your clarification, but it's 20% per year in the hopefully unlikely event that we don't get into that clause.
Correct. We don't anticipate we'll need the
Absolutely.
clawback.
Absolutely.
But that is how it works. So for every year that the restaurant remains open, there is a reduction in 20% of what he would have to pay back. So if he is open 1 year and then closes, he would only have to pay back 80% of whatever dollars he had received to that point.
Okay. And last, wishes for the best success, of course, but what's the target opening? ASAP, right?
June, no,
Sooner the better.
Soon-
March or June or something.
Thank you, trustee
Thank you, Mr.
Lautner.
President.
Emily, go ahead. I'm sorry, did I interrupt? Trustee Rocco?
Thank you, Mr. President. I did have because if I'm right, if it was all BDD, right, it would be, if I'm right, it would be like 13,500,000 to get about 135,000. Do I got that right? Okay. So we're thinking, it'd be like, you need to make it like $1 million, it'd be like 13 years before you would collect it. We're collecting 8 to 10. So what percentage are we anticipating coming from the TIF, and what percentage, do we have like a sense of, because you're saying 8 to 10, do we have a sense of what percentage is going to come from the BDD and what percentage is going to come from the TIF?
No, we don't. I think for future projects we may, once we've started receiving increment, but because we haven't actually received increment, and we don't know how the property is assessed, it's hard to do that calculation. We anticipate that the majority of the funds will come from the business district dollars, just because the estimates that were done as part of the feasibility study illustrate that that will be a greater revenue source. So most of the money that will be generated by the property will be generated through the business development district dollars rather than through the TIF dollars.
So in the TIF dollars, because he's doing major improvement and the taxes kind of hold off for 3 years, I think, and then 3 years, this is when you're going to get that big jump. So when that big jump comes in and the increase in those tax dollars based upon, because it's going to be improved property, I would imagine, after the 3 years, all that improvement is all TIF money. Is that
Goes into the
accurate?
TIF fund. Increment that's generated over the.
The increment over,
prior
so
value.
so that 3%, or that after the 3 years, that big jump, okay.
Well, it will likely be reassessed before 3 years, but because.
But I
of the
think he
amount
holds,
of
I
resources
think he might
that's-
have some kind of 3-year freeze because he's remodeling, no? That just maybe residential, maybe I'm thinking residential, is that residential only? Okay, I'm going into residential. All right, I am uncomfortable with I want to say yes, but I am a little nervous because I don't know if I'm not sure how much went into the 135, how we got the 135,000, I guess. You know what I mean, the fact that we don't know, I mean, we don't, and I get we don't have these answers, but I'm not sure if we should have a better sense of it, or should I be comfortable?
We spent a lot of time going through the numbers.
Okay.
Quite a bit of time going through his projected costs. We also spoke with our TIF council about, for TIF and business district projects, what is sort of the typical percentage of costs that that municipalities reimburse. So our council said that, typically you would reimburse maybe 20 to 25% of the overall project cost. So if the project costs $1 million, you might incentivize $250,000 for the project, the total project. That's a kind of a good guideline. So
Okay.
we're incentivizing, and I'm trying to remember the number off the top of my head. I think it's closer to maybe 17 or 18% of his total costs. His total costs are estimated
900
at
something.
$908,000. So this agreement is for the $135,000 plus the water and sewer work that the board has already approved, which portion of the work that is related specifically to his project is $55,000. So even if you add that to the 135, which brings us to $190,000 in total incentive dollars, that's still less than 25% of his total project costs. So based on our discussions with our TIF council, just as it compares to typical TIF projects, it's a very appropriate incentive amount. But we did spend quite a bit of time talking through what the proposed improvements were. Larry was involved in a lot of those conversations, as was Chief Magos, and looking at all of the different building improvements that would be needed. We feel very comfortable that it's an appropriate amount.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time on this. Thank you, Ms. President.
Any other questions from the board? Well, I want to thank Emily and Julia and Kathy Orr and Kathy Keating, Jason, you and your team. This was negotiations at its best, and there's a lot going on. Jason, as a new business owner, you're beginning to realize, as we are, that there's a lot left to move forward with this project. And I believe the village is doing a lot, and you are doing a lot, and this teamwork is working well. I know it's negotiations, and we have to speak in front of residents and make sure that we're protecting our assets, but yet we want you to be very successful in bring quality life down to that end of our village, and hopefully attract other businesses, and we're here to support that. So it's gone well so far. There are some issues left that we need to talk about down the road, but good luck, and we'll make this happen. Emily, thank you for your expertise in this arena. So, any other comments from the board? Seeing none, Amanda, will you call the roll?
Trustee Messick?
Yes.
Trustee Rocco?
Yes.
Trustee Lautner?
Yes.
President DeCipio?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
And that concludes the Commercial Revitalization Committee.
Thank you, Trustee Rocco, for all the great work and standing in for Trustee Casera. Other reports, Village Clerk?
I have nothing to report, Mr. President.
Our Village Treasurer?
Nothing to report.
Our Village Engineer?
No report, Mr. President.
Our Village Attorney?
No report, Mr. President.
Motion to approve Committee and Collectors reports as presented.
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, my report, I have a couple items. One is Julia and Emily and Chief Magus and Chief Romp and I had the privilege of touring the Homeland Security facility on Friday. They were extremely gracious. They rolled out the red carpet. We're going to have them come to a board meeting and make a presentation, and also we're working with the chiefs to do a tabletop exercise in January or February, somewhere around there. Correct, Chief? Okay. The next thing is Trustee Lautner, Messick, myself, Emily, and Julia attended Chris's memorial. It was very well put together, very well done. Again, sorely missed. Trustee Messick had a great idea, and we're following up on it. We're going to have a plaque made for our wall with Chris's picture on it, just for his years of service to our village. Halloween coming up on Friday with the chamber. A lot of activities coming up. We're getting into holiday season, so we got a lot that's going to be happening. Julia is in San Antonio at a conference. Chief is in Philadelphia at a conference. We wish them well. They seem to be having fun. I just don't get the picture of the chief next to the Rocky statue, but but he looked good. He really did. I didn't know which one was Rocky and which one was Chief.
Yes.
So that's all I have. Any public participation? Seeing none, any new business? Trustee Rocco?
Yes, I do have a public participation. November 8th at 7 o'clock at LaGrange Public Library at Cossett and LaGrange Road, Lyons Township, Cook County Lyons Township Assessor Barbara Wyrick, if I may be mispronouncing her name, she will be speaking regarding consolidation of local governmental entities. Bring your tax bill to the meeting. It's at 7 o'clock. She's going to go through your tax bill and explain exactly where our taxes go and how it's broken down. And discussion will be had about local governmental entities and opportunities to maybe have consolidation. So that's 7 o'clock, November 2nd, LaGrange Public Library. Hosted, sponsored by the League of Women Voters.
Thank you, Trustee Rocco. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.